So Torchlight 3 finally let players get their hands on Endgame this week with their new PTR they set up. Now, I've put in about 12 hours so far and have to say, it's a strong foundation, right? There are some things that I really like and some other things I think they could really improve on. So let's go ahead and let's kick this thing off with an overview of Endgame, and then we'll dive into the pros and the cons. So I know there's some folks out there who aren't up to date on what Torchlight 3's Endgame actually is, so let's go ahead and we'll go through that really quick. Now, after you beat Act 3, you're going to talk with an NPC in Travail Point, which is the first home base, the hub that you'll go to, and he'll give you a genie's lamp. Use this in your inventory, head back to your fort, and you can place something called Fazir's Dungeon. It's a great pun. So what this will do is summon a genie from previous Torchlight games that'll give you access to the new endgame activity. So this thing is like an endless dungeon, right? It features some rogue-like elements, some modifiers, a whole bunch of really kind of neat stuff. And what you'll do is you'll chat with Fazir. You'll click on your first set of cards, read over the modifiers, and then pick whichever one you want. Now you can't choose more than one, so keep that in mind. Pick whichever one really kind of, vibes with you. And once you choose, it's going to summon a map with an objective to complete. Once you finish that objective, you'll face a mini boss, and then you'll take the portal back to your fort. At that point, chat with Fazir again, and he'll unlock the next set of cards. So that's kind of how the whole process works. Now, each tier has 4 sets of cards, with the last one always being a one-on-one boss battle. It's always against a kind of big act boss. So once you kill the boss, you'll unlock the next tier and a new global modifier. So for instance, it could be Blazing, which is a flame trails thing that affects all of the cards in addition to whatever modifier the card has. It could be something like the Netherwell, which causes an AoE that slows you down, that affects everything in addition to the other modifiers. So you can kind of stack them up a little bit. So I mentioned some rogue-lite elements. This is where this comes into play. If you die at any point in those 4 sets of cards, you start all the way over. Meaning if you're fighting the boss and you die, you have to do all 4 sets of cards again. If you kill the boss, you unlock a checkpoint, and now at that point you cannot fall below that checkpoint. So it's a cool system. I like it. I think one of the things that really kind of bugged me is the server stability on the PTR wasn't that great, and if you disconnect, you automatically fail. So if you're in a map, you're fighting a boss, and you disconnect completely out of your control, you automatically fail that challenge and have to start back at the beginning. So that's the full cycle of the end game, right? You do all that, you rinse, repeat, and there it is. That's Fazir's Dungeon. Now, it does get harder. Some of the modifiers can be brutal. We'll talk about that in a second. But I did want to take this time to let you know, not all maps are created equal, okay? Goblin maps are by far the quickest to complete because they're always kill 50 goblins, collect a couple quest items, and honestly, you can typically finish this objective in your first 2 mob pulls because the goblin mob density is so damn high. You can pull 2 things, bam, you almost have all 50, and then you're moving on to the next thing. And this makes the rest of the map a drag race where you just blast through the enemies, run past all the enemies, go kill the mini boss. Or you can take your time and go kill all the uniques and all the kind of rare elite mobs that are out there. So it's all up to you. And if you want to just blast through all of the card tiers and ranks, just choose the goblin maps each and every time, and you will fly through those things. So the second easiest one is the Nephirim, because once again, their density. The worst one of all are the spiders, the spider maps, because you have to kill 50 spiders. It's the most time consuming. You have to collect some quest items. But the problem is the spider spawns are so sparse that you're going to spend most of your time backtracking, trying to look through every single nook and cranny of that map to find the ones you have missed. And this is a problem because it's like they put exactly 50 spiders on the map instead of hundreds of enemies like they do with goblins or the Nephirim, and this leads to a more time-consuming experience. Typically, I'll either avoid spider maps completely, or if I do manage to get one, then it's just a vastly different experience than I have with the other maps. So let's talk pros. So I really like this setup, right? I like the idea behind it. I feel like it's a nice middle ground between mapping, and a few people loosely compared it to Delve from Path of Exile, which I can kind of see. Obviously, the deeper you go, the more difficult the encounters become. Now, this mode offers some really creative modifiers that I want to see more of. I was very surprised, I like it, and I want to definitely see more of these added in the future. Things like a random skill slot being locked for 3 minutes, or a spirit that follows you around and will damage and slow you if it reaches you. So it kind of gives that impending doom, right? There's always that thing following you around. Now, he's a little too slow for my liking. I wish he was much faster because you can outrun him in like 2 seconds. But still, things like that I really like. And the skill slot being locked for 3 minutes is interesting because if you have a build like I have, a spin to win build, and it locks my Cyclone ability, my primary ability, that forces me into a temporary playstyle that's going to slow me down. And then beyond those two, there's more generic ones like larger enemy packs, enemies becoming immune to status ailments, and so far I've reached the mid-30s tier in terms of cards. Granted, a lot of my time was wasted, like I said, on server issues the first day for the PTR, and I think I'd be a little bit further if it wasn't for that. Either way, I'm here now, and I'm progressing. Now, another thing that I really enjoyed with this mode is that it forced me to play differently depending on some of the modifiers, like blazing, for example. So blazing makes all of the enemies shoot out these flame trails on the ground, which hurt. They do a ton of damage. They completely just roast my health, and it's a pain in the ass. And you can't stand at them for very long, even if you have a decent chunk of fire resist, so you have to work around them. So it really kind of made my spin to win build play a bit more conservatively and almost have to focus on kiting everything to avoid getting caught in too many of those trails, especially if they stack up. So it forced me to kite rather than dive in and just blend things up. Now, most of the other modifiers aren't that bad. I can face tank quite a few of them, but things like Plaguebringer and Blazing really cause problems. So let's get into areas for improvement. Now, the biggest thing, number one, diversity. Let's get some more diversity in here. We need to get more of that because when it comes to cards, I feel like I had seen everything by the time I reached my second card tier, which sucks because those cards slowly lost their luster and the surprise of seeing new cards was almost immediately gone. And then that mode starts to become stale sooner than it should. And at mid-30s, I feel like I've already seen everything this mode has to offer. And honestly, at the point I am now, it's just like watching reruns. I already know what to click on, I know the ones to target, I know the ones to do, I know the ones to avoid, I know the ones that are going to take too long, the ones that are going to go quicker. And it just sucks because I need to see more. All right, so numbered list, what would I like to see? One, let's get some more cards in there that are creative, like the Spirit one, or even the one that reduces your maximum camera distance. Having these are going to help stretch the in-game experience further for those hardcore players, and even further for those casual players. And it's going to keep people on the lookout for new things, which is good. You want them curious, you want them continuously playing your mode to see if there's anything new. Number two, more bosses. The game already has a lack of boss encounters to begin with, which adds to the repetitiveness problem of the game, but I would like to see them add maybe 5 to 10 more. I know these take a while to design and create, so hopefully they already have some more in the pipeline. Number three, it's possible for a card set to have duplicate cards or modifiers. So if you click on one of those sets, you can get the same card maybe 2 or 3 times. It'd be really cool to have a system in place that either combines those effects into like a rare multi-modifier card or completely eliminate duplicates. Now, I would be all in for a rare card that takes those buffs and debuffs and just doubles them. So instead of like a 40% chance for an opponent to spawn a blazing trail, it's an 80% chance. But now it's also a 200% gear luck versus 100% gear luck. Things like that. I think that would be really, really cool. Now, all the other critiques I have are already based in the game itself, and they were stated in my previous review, which can be found in the description below. So ultimately, what do I think of the end game they have out there, right? What do I think of Fazir's dungeon? Well, I like it quite a bit. I feel like it does fill the gap the game had, because up until this point, after campaign, you had maps which weren't exactly fun, and they were gold sync, and they just were really, they were clunky. It was a clunky experience. But this is something that lays a good foundation, and they're going to need to continue to build on it. It can't just be something they add and then forget about it. Cards need to be continuously added. Modifiers need to be implemented. Bosses need to be created. They need to continue building on this. It needs to go from the concrete foundation it is now to a shed, to a house, to a manor, to a mansion. That's what we need. We need this thing to become more and more and more vast over time. That way it keeps all players interested, both new and old. If they wanted this to be a true end game, they're going to need that variety to avoid burnout. So for those of you who have played it, what do you guys think so far? Also, what do you guys think of Torchlight 3 in general? Let's get talking in the comments section below. Thank you guys so much for coming by. I appreciate it more than you guys know. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.